This week on the Push Pull Legs podcast, we have a great guest, so you might actually learn something this week. Luke Worthington has joined us to discuss PRI and where the industry is going. Three, two, one. Let's do some breathing.
Hey guys, welcome to the Push Pull Legs podcast with myself, Dan Meek.
And me, Tom Hall. And we have a very special guest today.
That's me, Luke Worthington.
And Luke
Very
Worthington, yeah. Nice to have you here, Luke. All is
Nice
well?
to be here. All's very well for a Sunday morning.
For a Sunday morning, yeah. People I'm getting, I just woke up about 15 minutes ago, so my hair is all ruffled. I hope you're enjoying that. That's all nice.
Yeah, lucky bastard. Some of us were up at 6 a.m, but yeah, never mind.
Yeah, never mind. How are you, Daniel? All good?
Yeah, mate, all tired. I'm all good. I'm a bit tired. I'm slurring my speech because I haven't got that many calories, and I'm on even lower calories now than I was last week. So yeah, real good fun, mate.
Strong.
Real good.
All right, so the reason why we have asked Mr. Luke Worthington on, who is a colleague of mine, friend of mine, and Dan's worked with him a bit as well, is he's going to talk. We did mention it a couple of podcasts ago that we wanted to get him on about PRI and kind of breathing control and what's actually happening in the world of essentially breathing, really, coming to more fruition in our industry. I think people are starting to take it a hell of a lot more seriously and start to incorporate it in the next kind of what has been a couple of years, and it will be being used going forward. So we thought this guy on here knows his shit. Even by Tony Gentlecore literally referred out the whole time to you, which was I was like, oh cool, Luke must know some stuff then, clearly. Which was it was eye-opening. So so I think we're just going to dive into anyway, well, introduce yourself, Luke. Actually, you might as well introduce it better than I can.
What, introduce me or introduce PRI or both?
Introduce yourself.
I'm Luke. I work very closely with Tom as running the internal education of Third Space, but also do a reasonable amount of consulting work in and around that. Main areas of interest are athletic performance, and mainly I'm an ex-athlete myself, and that's how I kind of got into this business in the first place. PRI is, it's pretty vast. I mean, to say what is it is, we could be sat here for days and still not really answer that. It's PRI stands for Postural Restoration Institute, which gives an idea of an actual place, which it is. It is a place in Nebraska in the US, but it's really it's a school of thought more than an actual institute. When I came across it a good few years back with Tony, who you mentioned, and that was over in Boston. I spent some time over there just kind of figuring out what Tony and Eric Cressy, that is, were doing with shoulders and shoulder performance and shoulder rehab with their baseball guys. Went there thinking we're going to be talking, joint mechanics and force couples and all that kind of stuff. Got there and saw them doing some stuff that I'd just never seen before, and just thought, okay, what the hell is this? But it blew my mind. And so I've got various animals all over the place.
Yeah, people listening on the audio, that was actually a cat that you just kind of put across the not just like a sound effect.
There's a cat and a dog, kind of two cats and a dog kind of walking around the place at the moment. But I was expecting super technical shoulder mechanics, and I suppose that is what I got over there. But then I saw them doing these doing this kind of positional breathing drills and some other little activation work, and the changes in range of motion, in pain, in performance that were pretty much instantaneous just kind of knocked me sideways. And and I just said to Eric and Tony, I said, okay, where do I get some of that? I need to know what this is. And it went from there, really. So I've been pretty much on the PRI bandwagon for the last however long ago it was that I was in Boston with them. So it's probably 4 or 5 years now. 5 years in November, actually. Yeah. And yeah, I travel back and forth to the States 3 or 4 times a year, studying and learning and collaborating with guys over there. And I'm pretty passionate about trying to bring that school of thought over here. So we've actually got some people from the Institute coming over here early next year, which will be pretty groundbreaking. Keen to make sure that people understand really that take it for what it is. It's got this sort of reputation of being like magic tricks and party tricks, and people like balloons and weird shit happens. It is that, but that's like 1%. It's really kind of very in-depth biomechanics and neuromechanics is how it works. So I'm keen to make sure that people understand really what it is. It's a little bit more than just doing a few party tricks with balloons.
Yeah, I mean, the party tricks that you refer to is I've actually seen Luke in action at a couple of our seminars that we've done.
In a weird way.
And literally, like for hamstring flexibility or alignment, basically, it was what we were getting at. Is he'll make him go into what is basically a hamstring bridge and give him a balloon to breathe in, and sits there blowing up a balloon, and then henceforth his hamstrings are no longer tight, and everybody's like, oh my god, I gotta get a balloon. Like it's not the balloon.
Yeah, just carry a balloon around with you everywhere you go. If you ever see a footballer on a pitch playing football blowing up a balloon, it's probably because of that.
It's probably because of Luke. Yeah.
Yeah, probably me. Well, you might see them on the touchline blowing up a balloon, which is not a bad thing. Yeah, I mean, is it because of the balloon? Possibly. It's that sort of little magic trick, if you like, that you mentioned. That's when there are a few things going on there. There's a purely biomechanics approach, and there's a kind of a neuroscience approach with that too. So if we think of I'll talk you through that example, and it might it'll put it in some context. So the kind of that hamstring trick is looking really at someone's alignment and understanding that their alignment might not be what we think it is. If we consider that a pelvis in most athletic populations is rotated forwards, we all know that. We all know our stuff. Which is going to put the hamstring under a certain amount of tension. It's neural tension as opposed to tissue shortness. So the person kind of walking around going, God, my hamstrings are tight. They're really walking around going, God, my hamstrings are really, really active. That's really what they're saying. Now, what that example that you saw me do in one of the seminars was I used hamstring activation as opposed to hamstring mobilization to reduce it. So what I did was got the guys to really activate their hamstrings in that kind of like hemi-bridge position to sort of rotate the pelvis back somewhere close to neutral, which reduces the relative tension in the hamstrings. If you follow, so rather than pull on it, make them longer, make them more relaxed, and exacerbate the problem, we actually do the opposite. So do the opposite of what people think we're going to do. So they think, oh, I feel tight, I want to stretch it. But what we actually do is we don't stretch it, we activate it, we kind of make it, we make it shorter, if anything. So we move the bones that are attached to, and we reduce the neural tone rather than actually changing the length of the tissue itself. So they no longer feel tight. That's the kind of biomechanical approach. The balloon shit is where it gets a little bit clever. So what we're doing there is, again, two things. From a mechanical point of view, we're just putting a diaphragm in a better position. I mean, diaphragm's a huge, big muscle, and it kind of hoops from rib cage in a kind of parachute shape, attaches to lumbar spine. If everything's wonderful in the world, it contracts, it pulls ribs in and out, and we kind of get air and out of our body. If all is not good in the world, which most of the time it's not, we're not in a optimal position to do that. But that guy's still going to contract. He's still going to work, 40,000 times a day. Rather than pull ribs to spine, it's then going to pull spine to ribs. So it's still going to try and do the same action. So if someone is sitting in an extension posture, which most of the people that guys like us are going to come across, it's just going to pull them into it even more. Their ribs are going to be up at the front, every time they take a breath in and out, it's just going to pull their lumbar spine anteriorly towards that rib cage. So it's going to pull them deeper and deeper into this extension pattern that they're in, which therefore has this knock-on effect of increasing relative tension on the hamstrings. So there are two components that are going on there. So that approach that you saw me do, we were kind of working inside out. So we were working activate the hamstrings, try and pull the pelvis into a better position, and then we're working put the diaphragm into a better position so it doesn't keep driving them back into that same problem posture.
Yeah.
That's the kind of the simple version. There's some other stuff that was going on as well. The kind of that forced exhalation and the pausing and everything else that you saw me do is really that's where I get some sort of brain science. Your brain, or our brain, everyone's brain, will be very reluctant to accept anything that it considers to be a threat. So if you're sitting there, or we're all sitting here on chairs at the moment, we've figured out a way to live and survive on the chairs that we're sat on, which is cool. If we spent 20 out of 24 hours sat on these chairs, we'd be very, very good at surviving in this position, which means any change to that position, our brain might see it as a bit of a threat, and it doesn't really like that. So that's animals fighting. Anything that we do too much of, our brains are going to kind of lock down, really. So these guys that we see in our walks of life that are in this kind of like gross extension pattern, pack it in. They end up locked into that pattern and they can't do anything about it. So they physically can't move out of it. So they're getting what we would call neural tension, as opposed to a lack of tissue length. When we make them exhale against resistance, so which is what the balloon is all about, and then we give them a little pause, we're sending them into a mild kind of panic state. So their brain is kind of thinking, shit, I've got no air. I'm not going to be able to ever get any air ever again. We then show them that they can, and we just make them kind of breathe in quite a controlled manner in this sort of new position. The brain then figures out, okay, nothing bad happened. I'll allow you to have that. And it just down regulates. It's really sort of turning stuff off. These kind of extension based power athletes that we come across are, they're kind of walking around permanently on. They're like wired up all the time. And what we're doing really is just kind of dialing them down a little bit, and just allowing them just to let go.
So I think there's something before we take that, because in your walks of life, Bam, in terms of bodybuilding, these guys are consistently on, I would say. I think I can quite happily call out Mr. Stephen Box and say his alignment and his mobility is not kind of optimal.
Yeah, I think it's something that obviously is really interesting for me, because by definition, bodybuilders or people that are interested in their physique quite a lot are, in my opinion, and this is just for me, generally I know what I'm like in my off season, but inherently kind of lazy. And in a sense, if we probably spend more time sitting down than other athletes, because it's kind of like you're knackered, you want to conserve energy, that kind of thing. And also when you're dieting, you have a lack of energy, so you spend a lot more time sat down. But also, yeah, as you mentioned, is you don't really spend that much time thinking about those kind of things, about alignment and things like that. And actually, in a sport of bodybuilding where symmetry is actually really, really, really important, there's a lot of focus on how things look rather than how they function. And that's something that I think that I've managed to bring into things with, like I've spoken with Steve before, about thinking about how we do things a little bit differently, rather than just how a muscle looks on the outside, is actually thinking about how we're training that muscle and how we work through strength and how we work through different properties of an athlete, essentially, that you can actually create a better looking physique because of that. And breathing is an aspect that, like I said, I literally know nothing about it, but I know I've seen the tricks and I've seen them done. And it's really interesting to think how you can apply that to a sport where, like you say, symmetry is really important, and activating the right muscle is actually really, really, really important, because you're working on a weak area. And if you're saying, oh, my hamstrings are tight, And actually, as you've mentioned, maybe they're not. It's just that you actually just have really poor posture. It's interesting to know that you can fix that in a roundabout way rather than just telling someone to go and stretch more, which, as we've known for a long time, it's not that at all. It's never just, just do a hamstring stretch and you'll fix yourself. We know that.
If that was the answer, no one would have that problem.
Exactly. My question off the back of that, and a really intriguing question I've got, is at what point do the acute effects of doing those tricks, I keep calling them tricks, but they're not, they were, the acute effects of that kind of wear off, and at what point do those then changes become chronic, and how long would you say on average it would take someone to not fix themselves, because I understand obviously they're going to have to carry on doing this regularly as part of a program so that they don't slip back into their old patterns, but at what point does it become something that you don't have to think about all the time and it just kind of happens a bit more naturally?
Well, so that's a good question, because it's one that I'm asked a lot, actually. In that, so when I first see someone, or I first see a client, rehab person or an athlete or whoever it may be, we go through a full assessment, we work out what's working, what's not, and then we'll do a few adjustments, some interventions there and then, and they kind of sit up and go, "Wow, that's it. Am I done?" And it's, sometimes yes, but those. The sort of the party tricks, the balloon tricks, all that stuff are, that's sort of 1% of it, really. So if we give an example of, an upper body thing, 'cause most people can relate to that. So if someone, for example, and most people can't reach behind their back with their right arm as well as they can with their left, there are tons and tons of reasons. So horizontally, Tom. So there are. There are lots of reasons why that's harder. Some are anatomical, some are neural. It's just the way it is. Most people will struggle with that. Most people have if you're looking from the top down, most people will have like an anti-clockwise rotation to their torso. It's just the way we're made. So therefore, reaching back with the right arm is mechanically harder than it is with the left. Now, if we do some of our kind of PRI magic to sort that out, then cool, we've done it. But that's just day one. That's step one. We've now just given you the ability to get there. So if you spent, 30 years never been able to reach your right arm behind your back, then all of a sudden you have the ability to do that. That's not you finished. That just means you have the ability to go there. It doesn't mean that you're good there and that you're strong there. And that's where that's really where this stuff comes into its own. Is we can, I can free up range of motion in pretty much anyone, and allow them to do things that they've never done before. But if I just left them to that would be pretty negligent, and that's not really what I'm about at all. If I just kind of made everyone super mobile and then just sent them back out into the world, I'm really going to be sending people out to really screw themselves up even more. So if we, PRI is neuroscience, much more than it is biomechanics. So if my brain has never understood what it's like to have my right arm behind my back, then all of a sudden it can go there. Next time my right arm is behind my back and something weird happens to it, I don't know how to deal with that at all. That's like the dark zone neurally. So the sort of the short answer to your question is we now have to train these new positions and we have to get really good at them. And it's only once those positions become trained that we then kind of own them. So if you're thinking of the arm example, I might be really good at having my arm straight out in front of me. I might be able to bench press a house and I'm awesome at that. But I can never reach that right arm behind my back. I go and do some PRI interventions, some resets, and then I can do it. I can get my arm behind my back. The tiniest little bit of load is going to send my brain into panic mode. It doesn't know how the hell to deal with that. So the likelihood of me being injured in that new position is actually pretty high. So I have no control there. So the treatment stroke training approach is first of all, you have to kind of get the person neutral and then you permit the range. But if you're kind of good at what you do, you should be able to do that pretty much immediately. Where you kind of, set the men from the boys really is can you then train the new position? And that's hard. That takes time, depending on how sort of kinesthetically aware the the athlete is, that can be pretty taxing. But it's only once you've done that you consider the person finished, if you wish. So to answer the question, how long does it last is really until you undo it. So if everyone's used to kind of deadlifting and squatting in a certain way, and then you can do a bunch of PRI resets to permit different range, and then they just go and squat and deadlift in the way they've always done it, they'll be back to the way they were immediately. They'll be back to the way they were by the end of the first set. The trick is then feeding this into how they train to allow them to use the range that they've now got.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's something that, in my head, that's how I assumed it would be. It's kind of, someone's breaking down consistently, whether it's, they're an athlete or a bodybuilder or whatever, and it's a squat or deadlift that's causing the issue. You're not going to jump back up and go, right, back to doing 100 kilos, let's see how it looks. It's going to be, you're starting again now from literally like the bar. If that, your body weight, let's just see how you move. And even then, I bet there's some setbacks where they still have to, like you say, think about how they're moving again. It's not a case of just go, right, drop down and give me a squat, because you do that without even thinking. I guess there's an element of, you have to really concentrate on what you're doing once you've found that new range, so that, because even your body is a load to a certain degree. And I guess there's those aspects that can be that are really important, that you require a lot of patience, I guess, during this process. And that must be one of the hardest things, I imagine, to get through to a client, is trying to explain to them that you need patience through this process, otherwise you're going back to square one. I can imagine that must be quite challenging.
It can be. I mean, the way I feed it in with clients really is it becomes, this stuff becomes like my A2s, B2s, C2s in my programs. So they're coming, if as long as they're a functioning athlete and they're training, like I want them to keep training. But I'm just going to kind of layer some of this stuff in, just sort of sneak it in there. So if they're coming out and they're doing, their main lift is a deadlift, they're still doing their deadlift, but instead of just kind of sitting down talking about the weather in between, I've got them doing something. I've got them doing some of this stuff. So I've got them laying on their back, or I've got them in sort of half kneel position doing some, doing some PRI work. Then they come back and do set 2. So we're kind of like gradually feeding it into them. So they. We're adjusting them, we're training them in their new alignment, and then we're adjusting them again, training them in the new alignment again. And then over time, that tends to sort of lock down the new position. Rather than say, okay, we're going to spend 6 months just lying on the floor, biting on a stick and blowing up balloons. And I think, well, what the fuck am I doing? That's not, that's not really what I think it should be about, especially not with athletes. If they're training, we want to keep them training. But we just kind of sneak a little bit in. It becomes quite a key part of their warm-up. So I get them in the best position possible right at the start of their warm-up before they do all their mobility. Then we just layer it in as they go. So they're doing a lot of it, but they're still training. And I think that's really key. PRI has kind of exploded, especially in the States in the last couple of years, and it's got a bit of a bad rap recently for people just getting a little bit too stuck, down the rabbit hole really, and just looking at a client, looking at an athlete, and just saying, "Oh, you're so jacked up, you're so screwed up. We got to spend like 6 months just getting you neutral," and that's not really what it's about. Like we shouldn't be taking training effects away from people. They still have to train. We can make them better and healthier and more functional at the same time, but the people are coming to us to train, and end of story. So they've still got to do that.
Yeah, I think that's the one big thing that maybe I've always thought about is I guess it's when anybody specializes in a certain area, you tend to go, once you get really good at it and you're like, I've nailed that, you kind of run down that rabbit hole and be like, we're going to do a shit ton of this stuff because I know it works and all that kind of stuff. But we've also got to think ourselves as, we still market ourselves as either S&C coaches or trainers or whatever. You still market yourself as that, but a PRI specialist basically. But you're still going to have the training effect on your clients that you want to get them to exactly where you want to go. So in terms of maybe like powerlifting, bodybuilding, is there any experience that you've had, Luke? Anybody that's come to you for anything like that? Or I guess it's just strength-based athletes?
Yeah, well, no, I'm working with a girl at the moment she's just qualified for for World Championships in Louisiana. English girl, and she's she was a great deadlifter anyway. But if we think, just kind of like backing up a few steps to think about what alignment actually does and what the benefits of it are. So if we if we think of this girl's a shit hot deadlifter. So we think about prime movers in there. So we think we need to get our hamstrings in the best position possible to pull that bar off the floor. If her hips aren't quite where we think they are, she can't be using all of the hamstrings in both of her legs. If one of her legs is slightly off center or is slightly rotated within the pelvis, or the pelvis is rotated on top of the legs, whichever way around we want to consider it, she's kind of walking around using like 1.5 legs, if that makes sense, like 1.5 sets of hamstrings. She's going to be using some other stuff to get that bar up. But then she's kind of setting herself up for problems later down the line. So when she's a power athlete, and she's a very good power athlete, she's equaled a world record deadlift for her body weight. We're setting her up to try and beat that world record next month. But what PRI is doing with her, she's not injured. So we're using that purely for performance. We're putting her into the most optimal position where she can use all of the tissue she's got available to her and give herself the best opportunity to kind of use her levers to get that weight off the floor. She didn't come to me saying, okay, everything hurts, I need I need PRI because that's some kind of like funky rehab stuff. It was, she'd heard of it. We kind of had a few mutual friends, and she sort of came to me saying, well, look, I've heard this stuff makes people better performing human beings. I need some of that, and that's really what it is. So it gets kind of like blocked in that sort of rehab arena, but really kind of human performance is where it's at, and rehab is essentially human performance. We're just trying to, we're just starting from a different starting point. If you're injured, your starting point's just a little bit further back than if you're already fully functional. But if you're a fully functioning athlete with some less than optimal starting positions, if you can optimize your starting positions, you can use your levers to the most, the best possible way that is available to you. Then you get stronger. You get faster. You perform better.
Strong, mate.
Cool, yeah. Obviously conscious of time, Luke, we know you need to shoot off, but my last question is just, where can people learn more about this? So if I wanted to go to a credible source, obviously you've mentioned some guys are coming over soon, which I want to find out more about so I can come. But just in general, where's a good place to start? Because obviously we know I can just type it on the internet, right, on Google, and who knows what the hell's going to come up. We know the internet is a dodgy place, believe us. But it's kind of one of those things of if I was to follow someone who knows their shit, or there's some good research or some good books or whatever it might be, where would you recommend going?
He doesn't says his that's what I was going to say. If it's not Luke Worthington's Facebook page or Instagram, then why not?
I'm putting a fair amount of this stuff out on my social channels at the moment, because it's kind of it's a big mission of mine to get the I believe in this stuff. It works. I'm very passionate about it. So it's a big mission of mine at the moment to kind of really let people understand it for what it is. That it's more than making balloon animals, and it's we can really make big changes to people if we really understand what we're doing to them. My social channels are all the same. It's all Luke W Training, and there's I'm putting out a ton of content there at the moment. Some of the seminar programs that I'm working on with Tom, we're starting to layer some of this stuff through as well. So there's little snippets in there. There's a goal of mine is to get this is to start to open out that seminar program. So by sort of early next year, we as in me are going to be delivering sort of in-service programs on this, just kind of taster level stuff. Pretty really just sort of what we've discussed today, but giving people a bit of practical exposure as well, so they kind of get roughly what it's all about. You can kind of people can get themselves down to that and get a bit hands-on with it. people to follow who make this stuff very accessible. Mike Reinhold, who is a physiotherapist based in Boston, is a ninja at this stuff, and he puts a lot of content out that puts it in a real kind of simple form. He's a cool guy. Works again with a lot of power athletes, a lot of baseball guys. But he's a big PRI advocate, and he gets stuff out on a kind of weekly basis.
Yeah, I guess I think the main thing about us bringing it on, because in the US they seem to have taken it a little bit further than we have yet. And I did listen to a little bit of a Facebook Live of Eric Kreze, and he was basically one of the questions was, where do you see the industry and what is going to be the most important factor in 5 years? What's going to be the biggest change? And he outlined the fact of PRI, breathing control, and actual neurological kind of finding out where your body can actually sit was going to be the biggest thing for everybody, and they need to learn about it, otherwise you're going to get left behind. So. Yeah.
He's completely right. There's another physiotherapist who is a big advocate of this stuff in the States, a guy called Michael Mullen, who just made a throwaway comment during the recent Olympics, saying that the big thing in the London Olympics and Beijing was the kinese tape. You saw everyone with the multicolored tape all over the place. Yeah. Okay, what the fuck's that? The Rio Olympics, it was cupping. You saw everyone with these kind of big hematomas on their backs, and he's just saying, I'm pretty sure the way things are heading, next Olympics it's going to be balloons. Because it takes about that long, really. I mean, this stuff is huge in the States. All the sort of NFL teams are right on board with it. So the baseball teams. And in the UK, there's me, and there's another guy in the north of England who's bang on board with this stuff as well. I work with a lot of some Premier League footballers and some track guys with this stuff as well. So it's getting out there. But as with most things, we're probably a generation behind the US in terms of embracing it. We're a little bit more resistant to change. So it is going to take time. The next Olympics is it's 4 years away. If Mike is right, then he thinks it'll take about that long to get the word out and get it embraced, and then you're going to see a bunch of guys by the side of the track blowing up balloons.
So what you're basically saying to us is invest in balloons right now.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Strong.
But the balloons are a prop, really. They just make people breathe. Yeah. That's all it is. And if I make someone blow up a balloon, I can see what they're doing. I can actually eyeball it and go, okay, you didn't breathe at all. That thing hardly moved. It's a prop. We don't need it, but that's kind of what we're known for.
Yeah, that's cool. Should we cap it there, because Luke's got a very important thing to go to. So
yeah.
All right, mate. Well, thanks for coming on. If you want to, do you want to spout out all your social media things in one, or is it just
in one? It's Luke W Training. That's where I'm at, and that's that's Twitter, that's Facebook, that's Instagram, that's YouTube, that's the whole lot.
That's right. We'll be firing out all of your links and stuff when we send this out as well. So yeah, go give him a follow. Go contact him if you want to learn about it. I guess.
Reach out. I mean, I'm I get back to everyone who does that. Not always immediately, but I'll do it. Especially about this sort of stuff. It's it's right in my gun sight at the moment. So reach out. I'm happy to help out anyone who wants to know about this kind of stuff.
And if anybody wants to kind of learn about it, send us a question and we'll invite him back on, because there's clearly we've scratched a surface of just actually finding out what the fuck it is, basically. Mm-hmm. And then we can actually start talking about it really. And Dan can apply it to all of Team Box.
If a particular athlete or a particular client that they think this might be relevant for and want to work it through as a case study, I'd be all over that.
Yep. Cool, man. Awesome.
Cool. Perfect. Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, guys.
There you go, Tommy.